The rustling leaves whispered secrets only Sarah understood. Deep in the shadowed embrace of the woods, far from the judgmental eyes of the settlement, stood her small cabin. It wasn't much, just a single room with a sturdy fireplace, but it was her sanctuary. Sarah wasn't like the other women in town. While they busied themselves with needlepoint and gossip, she found solace in the towering trees and the babbling brook that snaked through the forest. She'd arrived in this new land with her family, full of hope and dreams of a better life. But the dreams quickly soured. The endless toil, the constant struggle, and the way they treated those who were different, especially the enslaved people, chipped away at her spirit. She couldn't reconcile the promises of freedom she'd heard with the reality of chains and forced labor. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach each time she saw the wagons returning from town, the weary faces of the enslaved etched with sorrow. The whispers of rebellion, quickly silenced, fueled her discontent. So, she retreated, seeking refuge in the wild. She learned to hunt and forage, becoming self-sufficient, more at peace with the company of squirrels and birds than with her own kind. But the world outside her woods was always present, a constant reminder of the injustice she couldn't ignore. She knew, deep down, that her solitude wouldn't last forever. Something was coming, a change she could feel in the very air. The change Sarah felt in the air was a scream suppressed, a prayer carried on the wind. Miles away, under the oppressive gaze of the plantation house, Elijah made his move. He'd planned it for weeks, studying the routines of the overseer, the changing of the guards. He knew the risks, the brutal consequences of failure, but the thought of another sunrise under the whip was unbearable. His body ached from the endless days in the fields, his spirit bruised by the constant degradation. He dreamed of freedom, a place where he could choose his own path, where his name meant something more than just a tool to be used. He wasn't running from something, he was running toward something, hope. Under the cloak of a moonless night, he slipped past the sleeping dogs and the watchful eyes of the guards. The earth was cold beneath his bare feet as he sprinted towards the woods, the only sanctuary he could imagine. Thorns tore at his skin, branches whipped at his face, but he didn't dare slow down. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of fear through him. He knew they would be coming. He ran for what felt like hours, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming in protest. He stumbled and fell, scraping his knees on the rough ground, but he pushed himself back up. He had to keep going. Freedom was just beyond the next tree, the next hill, the next breath. He was fueled by the stories his grandmother used to tell him, stories of the Underground Railroad and the brave souls who helped others escape to the north. He prayed he would find such a soul, someone who would risk everything to help him find his way to freedom. Days blurred into nights. Exhaustion gnawed at Elijah, each step a victory against the relentless pull of despair. He hadn't eaten since the escape, his stomach a hollow ache. He drank from streams, the cold water offering fleeting relief. His hope, once a bright flame, flickered precariously in the face of hunger and fear. Then, through the dense trees, he saw it, a wisp of smoke curling into the sky. A cabin. The possibility of help, of food, of a moment's rest, surged through him. But caution held him back. He had no idea who lived there. Could they be trusted? Were they kind? Or would they turn him in, back to the horrors he had risked everything to escape? He crept closer, his senses on high alert. He peered through a gap in the wooden walls. Inside, a woman sat by the fire, mending clothes. Her face was etched with a quiet strength, her eyes holding a sadness he recognized. Sarah. He hesitated. He was too weak to run if she betrayed him. But the desperation in his heart outweighed the fear. He took a deep breath and stumbled towards the door, his voice hoarse and barely audible. "Please," he croaked, "I need help." Sarah looked up, startled. Her hand instinctively reached for the hunting knife she kept by her side. She saw him then, a young man, barely more than a boy, his clothes torn, his body bruised, his eyes filled with a plea she couldn't ignore. He collapsed at her doorstep, unconscious. The decision was made. She had to help him. Sarah worked quickly. She dragged Elijah inside, his body limp and heavy. She closed the door, barring it shut, a futile gesture against determined men, but it gave her a sense of security. She examined his wounds, cuts and bruises, evidence of his desperate flight. Gently, she cleaned them with water and bandaged them with strips of cloth. She didn't know much about medicine, but she knew enough to keep him alive. She fed him broth, spoon by careful spoon, watching his chest rise and fall with each breath. He remained unconscious for hours, muttering in his sleep, haunted by nightmares she could only imagine. As he slept, Sarah wrestled with her conscience. Helping him was dangerous, a crime punishable by imprisonment, or worse. But looking at his young face, so vulnerable and broken, she couldn't turn him away. She remembered her own dreams of freedom, her own struggles against injustice. How could she deny him the same chance she craved for herself? When Elijah finally awoke, he was disoriented and weak. He looked around the small cabin, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. He saw Sarah sitting beside him, her expression calm and reassuring. "You're safe," she said softly. "You're safe here." He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his leg. He groaned and fell back against the pillow. Where am I?" he asked, his voice raspy. "You're with me," Sarah replied. "In my cabin. You're safe now. Rest. You need to heal." A flicker of trust sparked in Elijah's eyes. He closed them again, surrendering to the exhaustion. For the first time since his escape, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had found sanctuary. Days turned into weeks. Elijah slowly regained his strength, his body mending, his spirit healing. He helped Sarah with chores around the cabin, chopping wood, fetching water, tending to the small garden she had cultivated. They worked in companionable silence, a shared understanding passing between them. In the evenings, as the fire crackled and the shadows danced on the walls, they talked. Sarah told him about her disillusionment with the settlement, her growing unease with the way things were. She spoke of her dreams of a fairer world, where everyone was treated with respect, regardless of their background. Elijah shared stories of his life on the plantation, the backbreaking labor, the constant fear, the dreams of freedom that kept him going. He spoke of his family, his mother who had taught him to read in secret, his grandmother who filled his head with tales of hope and resistance. He described the taste of freedom he longed for, the simple right to choose his own destiny. Through their stories, a bond formed between them, a connection forged in shared hardship and mutual respect. Sarah saw in Elijah a resilience and a spirit that inspired her. Elijah saw in Sarah a kindness and a courage that gave him hope. They were from different worlds, different backgrounds, but they were united by a common desire, freedom. They became friends, confidants, allies in a world that seemed determined to keep them apart. They knew their sanctuary couldn't last forever, but for now, they had each other. And that was enough. The tranquility of the woods shattered with the sound of barking dogs. It was faint at first, a distant echo carried on the wind, but it grew steadily louder, a chilling reminder of the danger that loomed. Sarah's peaceful world was about to be invaded. Caleb, the leader of the slave catchers, was a man hardened by years of brutality. His face, scarred and weathered, reflected a ruthless determination. He saw enslaved people not as human beings, but as property, as a means to an end. He had a reputation for never giving up, for tracking down runaways with relentless efficiency. He enjoyed the hunt, the power it gave him, the fear it instilled in others. He rode at the head of his men, a pack of ruthless bounty hunters, their horses snorting, their rifles gleaming in the sunlight. They questioned every traveler they met, searched every cabin they encountered, their eyes scanning the woods for any sign of their prey. The news of Elijah's escape had reached Caleb quickly. He knew the value of a strong young man like Elijah, and he wasn't about to let him slip away. He followed the trail with grim determination, pushing his men relentlessly, ignoring their complaints and their exhaustion. Sarah and Elijah heard the dogs long before the men arrived. A cold dread washed over them. Their haven was no longer safe. The sound of the approaching hunters was a death knell, signaling the end of their fragile peace. The time for hiding was over. The time for action had come. Elijah looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. Sarah met his gaze, her heart pounding, her mind racing. They knew what they had to do. They had to protect each other. They had to fight for their freedom. Sarah's knowledge of the woods became their shield. She knew every hidden path, every winding stream, every dense thicket where a person could disappear. With the urgency of survival pumping through their veins, they worked as a team. First, they erased Elijah's tracks around the cabin, sweeping away footprints, scattering leaves to cover any sign of his presence. Then, they created diversions. Sarah led Elijah to a nearby stream. She instructed him to walk upstream for a distance, the water washing away his scent, making it harder for the dogs to track him. Then, they doubled back, carefully placing their feet on rocks and fallen logs, leaving as little trace as possible. Sarah gathered herbs and scattered them around the cabin, masking Elijah's scent with stronger, more natural odors. She hung old clothes on a nearby tree, hoping to mislead the search party into thinking he had already passed through the area. She showed Elijah how to move silently through the woods, how to blend in with the shadows, how to listen for the sounds of danger. He learned quickly, his instincts honed by his own desperate flight from the plantation. They worked tirelessly, their movements precise and coordinated. The sound of the dogs grew closer, the tension ratcheting up with each passing moment. They knew their efforts might not be enough, but they refused to surrender. They would use every trick, every skill, every ounce of courage they possessed to protect each other and to fight for their chance at freedom. The woods, once Sarah's sanctuary, had become a battleground. And they were ready to fight. The ruse worked for a while. The slave catchers, momentarily confused by the misleading trails, spent precious time searching in the wrong direction. But Caleb was not easily fooled. He noticed the subtle signs, the broken twigs, the disturbed earth, the faint scent of herbs that didn't quite belong. He knew they were close. Suddenly, a shout pierced the air. "Over here! I see smoke!" Sarah and Elijah exchanged a panicked glance. They had been discovered. There was no time to prepare, no time to strategize. They had to run. Sarah grabbed her rifle and a small bag of supplies. She flung open the back door of the cabin, and they plunged into the dense undergrowth. The dogs, their barks growing louder and more frantic, were hot on their heels. They ran as fast as they could, their lungs burning, their legs aching. The woods became a blur of green and brown. They stumbled and fell, but they kept getting back up. They knew that capture meant certain death for Elijah, and a grim fate for Sarah as well. They could hear the shouts of the slave catchers behind them, growing closer with each passing moment. Caleb's voice, cold and menacing, cut through the air. "Don't let them get away. Bring them back alive." Sarah and Elijah pushed themselves harder, their fear fueling their flight. They knew they couldn't outrun the dogs forever. They had to find a way to escape, to disappear into the vast wilderness. Their survival depended on their wits, their courage, and their unwavering trust in each other. The escape from the cabin had begun. Their flight into the unknown had started. The wilderness tested them at every turn. Jagged rocks tore at their boots, thorny bushes scratched their skin, and swollen rivers threatened to sweep them away. They climbed steep hillsides, their muscles screaming in protest, and navigated treacherous ravines, their hearts pounding with fear. The weather turned against them. Torrential rain soaked them to the bone, making the ground slick and treacherous. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the sound of the pursuing dogs ever closer. They shivered with cold, their teeth chattering uncontrollably. Food became scarce. They ate berries and roots, anything they could find to sustain themselves. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, weakening their resolve. Sleep was a luxury they could barely afford. They took turns keeping watch, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Despite the hardships, their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Sarah used her knowledge of the woods to find shelter and food. Elijah used his strength and agility to help them overcome obstacles. They shared their fears and their hopes, their dreams of a better future. They learned to rely on each other completely. Sarah helped Elijah cross a raging river, risking her own life to ensure his safety. Elijah carried Sarah when she twisted her ankle, refusing to leave her behind. Their journey was a testament to the power of human connection. In the face of unimaginable adversity, they found strength in each other's presence, courage in each other's eyes, and hope in each other's hearts. The wilderness was a harsh and unforgiving teacher, but it also revealed the true depth of their resilience and the unbreakable bond that united them. Their flight was more than just an escape, it was a journey of self-discovery, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The relentless pursuit finally cornered them. They found themselves trapped in a small clearing, surrounded by the slave catchers and their snarling dogs. There was nowhere left to run. Caleb dismounted, his eyes fixed on Elijah. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Look what we have here. Thought you could get away, did you?" Elijah stood tall, his eyes filled with defiance. He refused to show any fear, even though his heart pounded in his chest. He knew what awaited him if he was captured, but he wouldn't give Caleb the satisfaction of seeing him break. Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between Caleb and Elijah. She raised her rifle, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice was firm. "Leave him alone," she said. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Caleb laughed. "Get out of the way, woman. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me very much," Sarah replied. "He's my friend. And I won't let you take him." Caleb's eyes narrowed. He recognized the fire in Sarah's gaze, the unwavering determination that mirrored his own. He knew she wouldn't back down easily. "You're protecting a runaway slave," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That's a serious offense. You could be punished for this." "I don't care," Sarah said. "I won't stand by and watch you treat another human being like property. He deserves to be free." Caleb signaled to his men. "Take her," he ordered. "And take him too." The slave catchers moved forward, their rifles raised. Sarah knew she was outnumbered, outgunned, but she refused to surrender. She raised her rifle higher, her finger tightening on the trigger. She was ready to fight to the death to protect Elijah. Her courageous decision hung in the balance, the fate of both of them hanging by a thread. Just as the slave catchers were about to close in, a volley of arrows rained down from the surrounding trees. The slave catchers, caught by surprise, stumbled back in confusion. A group of Native American warriors, faces painted with fierce determination, emerged from the shadows. They had been watching the pursuit for days, their respect for the land and their hatred of injustice compelling them to intervene. They had seen Sarah's kindness and Elijah's courage, and they knew they couldn't stand by and let them be captured. At the same time, from the other side of the clearing, a group of settlers emerged, armed with rifles and axes. These were men and women who had long opposed slavery, who had secretly aided runaway slaves on their journey to freedom. They had heard rumors of Caleb's ruthless pursuit, and they had come to offer their support. The slave catchers, now outnumbered and outflanked, were caught in a crossfire. Caleb's face twisted with rage and frustration. He had underestimated the resistance, the network of allies who were willing to risk their lives to fight against slavery. The battle was short and fierce. The Native American warriors fought with skill and precision, their arrows finding their mark with deadly accuracy. The settlers fought with a righteous fury, their determination fueled by their belief in freedom and equality. Sarah and Elijah joined the fight, their fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Sarah used her rifle to pick off the slave catchers one by one, her aim steady and true. Elijah fought with his bare hands, his strength and agility surprising his captors. Caleb, realizing that he was losing, ordered his men to retreat. The slave catchers, their tails between their legs, fled back into the woods, leaving behind their wounded and their dead. The clearing fell silent. Sarah and Elijah stood side by side, surrounded by their unexpected allies. They had been saved, not by a miracle, but by the courage and compassion of others. They were not alone in their fight for freedom. The settlers and the Native Americans guided Sarah and Elijah to a hidden settlement nestled deep in the mountains. It was a haven for runaway slaves and those who dared to defy the laws of the land. Here, Elijah could finally be free. The air in the settlement was filled with hope and camaraderie. People from different backgrounds worked together, sharing their skills and their stories. Elijah was welcomed with open arms, his arrival celebrated as a victory against oppression. He found a new purpose in helping others escape to freedom, using his knowledge of the land and his own experiences to guide them on their perilous journey. He became a symbol of hope for those who had lost everything, a living testament to the power of courage and resilience. Sarah decided to stay in the settlement as well. She had found a community where she belonged, where her values were shared, and where she could contribute to a cause greater than herself. She helped to care for the sick and wounded, using her knowledge of herbs and her gentle touch to heal their bodies and their spirits. One evening, as they sat by the fire, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, Sarah and Elijah reflected on their journey. They had faced unimaginable hardships, but they had emerged stronger and more determined than ever before. "I never thought I would find freedom," Elijah said, his voice filled with emotion. "But you saved me, Sarah. You gave me a second chance." "And you saved me, Elijah," Sarah replied. "You showed me that there is still hope in this world, that even in the darkest of times, kindness and courage can prevail." They looked at each other, their eyes filled with gratitude and affection. They had come from different worlds, but they were forever bound by the unlikely friendship that had saved them both. Their journey had been fraught with danger and hardship, but it had also been a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit and the transformative potential of unity and compassion. They were finally safe. They were finally free. The story of Sarah and Elijah spread throughout the hidden settlement and beyond, carried on the wind like seeds of hope. It became a legend, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, one person can make a difference. That courage and compassion can overcome prejudice and oppression. Their unlikely friendship, forged in the crucible of adversity, became a symbol of unity in a divided world. It demonstrated that people from different backgrounds, with different beliefs, could come together and build a better future. It showed that the bonds of humanity were stronger than the chains of slavery. Sarah and Elijah's story served as an inspiration to others, encouraging them to stand up for what they believed in, to fight for justice, and to never give up hope. It reminded them that even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the power of human connection can prevail. The fight against slavery was far from over, but Sarah and Elijah had played their part. They had shown the world that freedom was worth fighting for, that every human being deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, and that even the smallest act of kindness can have a profound impact. And so, the story ends, not with a neat and tidy resolution, but with a message of hope and possibility. A message that resonates even today, reminding us that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable world. A world where everyone is free, where everyone is equal, and where everyone has the opportunity to live their dreams. The world may be divided, but within each of us lies the power to unite, to heal, and to create a future where Sarah's and Elijah's courage becomes the norm, not the exception. Their legacy lives on.